Good afternoon, good evening. It's David Schlotthauer here with a detailed update on Hurricane Lee for Wednesday, September the 6th, 2023. As always, my thoughts in this video are mine alone, and making any decisions, please consult the National Hurricane Center and your local officials for the latest information for where you are. Now, taking a look at the latest shortwave IR satellite imagery on Hurricane Lee for Wednesday afternoon, September the 6th. Definitely a huge improvement with its overall structure since this morning and even since last night, which is why I'm making 2 videos a day on this system. Very well established outflow in all quadrants, but especially we got a really well established solidified type rain band, convective banding feature that rotates nearly all the way around the center of Lee as we speak, with what appears now to be a inner core, mostly formed eye wall where that CDO overcast actually is located. When we take a close and zoomed in view on Hurricane Lee, we can see a big explosion of deep convection here, which usually indicates that an eye wall is rapidly beginning to develop, especially on the eastern and southern sides of the system. And I'll show you here on microwave imagery in just a little bit, showing you with what we're looking at here. But once again, very intense convective banding feature here, wrapping all the way around the system. And despite this structure, though, we are still seeing a little bit of northeasterly shear, just a hair, probably about 15 or so knots, that is imparting the system a little bit from the northeast, where we do have a little bit of a clear slot that is still being visible on the imagery here. That's probably why we're seeing a lot of blobbiness to this, and we're not seeing any spiraling bands yet, but that should improve really quickly by the overnight and morning hours tomorrow. I'm very much guessing this is going to look a lot more organized than what it already is by tomorrow morning. Looking at the latest water vapor satellite imagery here, I always like showing this because it gives us an idea with what the overall environment is like surrounding Hurricane Lee, and it kind of pretty much straightforward. We have this feathery white cirrus. See this right here, that milky white? This is going outward from the storm, so you can kind of get an idea that this is a very healthy environment for Lee to intensify in. And as long as we have that in place, I do believe, strongly indicate that Lee is going to rapidly intensify over the next couple of days into a formidable, powerful Category 4 hurricane with winds that could reach about 150, maybe 155 miles an hour, still closing in close to a Category 5 within the next 4 to 5 days. And there is model proof of that. That is still an outside possibility in today's video. Now, looking at the microwave satellite imagery here, it's a good idea that I show you all this because I didn't show it in my previous videos. Is what you're looking at here is where the deep convection is being located by the microwave imagery. That's basically what this is. And we have a pretty good intense band of thunderstorms. That's what we saw on the visible satellite imagery, and how I said that this is rotating into the inner core. We have what appears to be a mid and low level eye-like feature that is already appearing on microwave. You can absolutely see it. It's a donut here, and this usually indicates that an inner core and eye wall is beginning to form, and this usually kind of forebodes a period of rapid intensification in an environment like this, with very little in the way of shear, very moist atmosphere, a lot of warm sea surface temperatures, and a very diffluent atmosphere, allowing this to quickly organize in a hurry in such a way that this is probably meeting or overperforming our expectations than what we thought yesterday, with this eye-like future well represented on the latest microwave imagery. The ADT has come in, and I will zoom this in when I edit the video, but you can see winds right now are at 74.6 knots. So this is probably stronger than 75 miles an hour. According to the NHC, they have this dubbed at 75. But I'm assuming it's probably at about 85, close to 90 miles an hour, given the structure that we have. It doesn't surprise me in their next advisory if they bring this up more significantly. We also even have a uniform CDO cloud region with a mid-level eye that is already appearing, as we stated here on the microwave. So even the satellite intensity estimates here really indicating that this is really getting organized pretty quickly in such a way that we could even see a major hurricane possibly in the next 1.5 to even 2 days or so. Might even be sooner than that. We just don't know. You know how these hurricanes could kind of mess with us as forecasters. This could overperform or underperform, and so far it is kind of overperforming. This is a look at the latest NHC advisory as of the 5 o'clock advisory 6 for Wednesday, September the 6th. And winds right now are at 75 miles an hour, moving still due west-northwest at 14 miles an hour. It has made a little bit of a turn to the more northwesterly direction on a bearing of about 290, 300 degrees, which means that this is gaining latitude a little faster. So right now, as it looks, this could miss the islands. Now, why I say could means that there could still be some minor impacts. Even so, this misses the islands. We have to understand we could be dealing with a category 4, if not a low-end category 5, which means the wind field is more bigger. The tropical storm wind field is even bigger than it could be. So that means there could be impacts along the Puerto Rico Virgin Islands. And the impacts are not really going to be the extremely heavy rainfall, maybe some banding features that could have some intense rainfall, but it's really going to be the amount of surf that this is going to generate. We're talking very big, dangerous, crashing waves that could reach heights of maybe 10 to even 15 feet, perhaps a little higher. Not only that, we could see coastal flooding in some of the estuaries, as well as some beach erosion on the north and northeastern facing beaches. So keep that in mind if you're going to the beach this weekend in the avoidance that Lee passes to your north. It might be a good idea that you stay away from the water this weekend. So here's a look at the latest on the chances of tropical storm force winds that look to be the chances on these islands. And right now for Puerto Rico, you have a 5 to 10% chance of tropical storm force winds. You have a 10 and 20% chance for tropical storm force winds on the Virgin Islands. All right. And I don't know what strikes me about the Virgin Islands, but if you take away like Virgin, it's like verge, like you're on the verge of getting hit by something, right? So if you a little bit of a, not really a joke, but a little bit of a how would you call it, a nursery rhyme or whatever it is. But either way you put it, there is still that chance that you could get slapped by at least tropical storm force winds that are at least 40 miles an hour or lower. That's probably the most extent at this point that you might see. Areas downstream of this, we just don't know with what will happen. So Lee is forecast to become a major hurricane by early Saturday and could impact or could bring impacts for the northern Leeward Islands this weekend. While it is too soon to determine the location and magnitude of these impacts, folks, I want you to really listen and open those ears up a little bit more, because I am providing you as accurate information as I can. Swells generated by Lee are expected to reach portions of the Lesser Antilles on Friday and the British and U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico this weekend. These swells are likely to cause life-threatening surf and rip currents. So again, maybe some beach erosion, maybe some coastal flooding too with that. Again, just stay away from the beaches and away from the ocean, as there is going to be some tremendous surf that's generated from this beast. So now looking at the latest NHC advisory package here, I wanted to show you all this because, again, reading this is more important than kind of skipping through it, right? Because there is some key points that I wanted to illustrate here in this video. Lee has continued to quickly organize today. Convective banding, especially over the eastern semicircle of the storm, has increased since this morning. The center is embedded within a small central dense overcast, and earlier this afternoon there was a hint of a ragged eye invisible imagery. although subjective Doverick intensity estimates were at 55 knots, and most of this objective intensity estimates were slightly below hurricane strength. The initial intensity has been raised to 65 knots based on the continued improvement in organization, but we just saw we're up to 75 knots on that right now, so it wouldn't be surprising to see that go up even further in time for the 11 o'clock advisory from the NHC tonight. So we're going to skip down here because, again, I don't want to bore you all, okay? That's the whole idea, because we have a lot more to share with you all. This is just the beginning of the video. We have hurricane models to look at. We have the global models and ensembles to look at. But what I'm going to go straight into is this last paragraph right here. The light to moderate easterly shear over Lee is forecast to decrease overnight, and that, along with warm sea surface temperatures and a moist atmosphere along the forecast track, should allow for additional intensification. With the small inner core seen in microwave imagery and the favorable environmental conditions, a period of rapid strengthening is a distinct possibility within the next day or two. Although the exact timing of any rapid strengthening is tricky to anticipate, the official forecast calls for a substantial 65-knot wind increase in strength during the next 72 hours. This is similar to the previous forecast, is near the upper end of the intensity guidance. By later in the weekend, hard to predict IOL replacement cycles could cause some fluctuations in intensity. So that's a thing that we really got to be aware of. And here's a look at the latest NHC intensity forecast. Let me make this big so you all can see. That's my job here. So within the next 12 hours, they're thinking by tonight with the next advisory, it will be at 85 knots. But again, that could be a little generous. We're already at 75 knots, I meant. We're already at about 75 knots now, so I guarantee this will probably get close to 80 knots or 85 knots, which would already be between about 90 to maybe 100 miles an hour by tonight. And then by tomorrow, we could see a major hurricane out of this. There is a distinct possibility that could happen. If not, definitely in the next 60 hours, we could see a Category 4, if not close, right here between the days 3 and 4 output. We could get very close to seeing a Category 5 Lee here with winds that reach 150 miles an hour. In fact, that's 10 miles an hour shy of Cat 5 status. So for that reasoning, you'll see my intensity forecast. It is pretty much the same and hasn't changed much since the previous advisory from the NHC and from my forecast this morning. So here's a look at the latest European model, and this is very crucial. Where is this headed? And many of you in the past comment section have asked me this. Is it going to hit the U.S.? I think it's going to hit the U.S. A few of you were even saying this will hit Florida. This will hit Cape Hatteras. I'm asking you all nicely to not call this a landfall in Florida. Please do not cause panic, because my job here is to not cause panic, let alone, and you all are basically showing a bad example. We, again, as a forecaster here, we do not know where this is going to head after the 5-day forecast. There's a lot of possible outcomes that I want to make it clear with you all. Okay, the weather pattern is very complicated beyond the 5-day forecast in such a way that the uncertainty here is probably 700 miles between the east of the east of Bermuda and Cape Hatteras and the northeast. Let's just put it that way. So let's go forward here. The kind of long story short, we have this ridge of high pressure that is carved out at the 500 millibar level. Again, the wind barbs are seen here blowing in from the easterly direction. Here is a cutoff low. So once we go forward here, the track forecast is very straightforward because the models are handling this pattern very well. We know where the ridge is going to be. We know where any trough-like situation is going to be. So the models are able to handle this forecast fairly good in retrospect. And we can see that with a lot of consensus among the Euro, the GFS, and its ensembles, really strongly indicating that this is not going to hit the islands now. All thanks to, one, the system is strengthening fairly quickly, and two, when systems quickly intensify like this, they typically tend to gain latitude a little more quicker. So at least it's a saving grace that this system, one, is strengthening fairly quickly to avoid any landfall, but secondly, where will it head beyond the 5-day forecast? We, again, as a forecaster, we don't know. So looking at that, looking at the Gulf of Mexico and the Eastern Atlantic, we can see out to 5 days. The pattern is straightforward. We got this ridge that tries to build in towards the northwest of the cyclone, but since we have a strengthening lee here, more than likely this ridge is not going to help this get steered westward. There's just no way about it, because if we look at the low-level steering flow, let's take a look at that. The ridge is actually more over here, so we get more of a southeasterly steering component with this. So the pattern is just not lining up or favorable for this to drive westward into Florida. There's just no way about it. You can look at the models all you want. There's just, ifs, ands, or buts, it's not going to make that turn. All right. Now, how close will this get to the Bahamas? It really depends on how strong this ridge actually is, because as you know, this ridge is there along to go with this trough that dips into the central U.S., and there's going to be an edge to where this ridge is able to expand westward, because a trough here is going to be in the way, and the ridge is going to be kind of budged along that trough axis. So by, let's go out to 180 hours out. This, I'll go a little further out, but not much beyond this, the 8-day forecast. We're going to take it out to about here. For Friday morning is all I'm going to do through the middle of September. I'll be a little nice enough in this video, but I really don't like going very far out for many reasons. So here's the trough here that's in place. And again, this is even tricky to model in the Euro type numerical forecast. Here's Bermuda right here. And so again, where this goes is going to be extremely important. Some of you are already saying there could be a landfall in New York, when in reality, the Euro does not go out beyond 10 days. All right, if you're just relying on one model, and that is the GFS model, I'm sorry to say, but I would be extremely careful with what you pick, because some of you are like, man, we're overdue for a hurricane. I think we should get one. Trust me, you do not want to be in Lee's shoes when it's a Category 3 or 4 hurricane. Looking at the GFS now, once again, we know where the forecast is in the short term. Let's go out and look at the long term. This is out to about day 8, and you can see that trough right there. The GFS has this a little further west than the Euro has it. You can see where the Euro is there. This is where the GFS is, so a little further west, and that's because this trough is a little faster on the approach to the southeast, and so it tries to grab a hold of that. But the problem here is it going to hit the eastern seaboard? I'm not going to go that far out, and this is, I think Thursday night into Friday morning is far enough for a lot of you to see. If you want to see further out than this, you can look at the GFS or the Euro yourself, and I'm not going to be the one to go that far, because a lot of variability does occur beyond even 5 days, let alone. I'm nice enough to go out to, say, 8 or 9 days, which is not a good idea in itself. So now looking at the hurricane models, we really want to look at this, because this, the H-Wharf has trended up a little bit more. 929 millibars right now, with winds that could reach about 128 knots, 130 knots. That's a high-end Cat 4 hurricane at this point in the numerical forecast, and it remains fairly strong here as it moves pretty much to the west-northwest throughout the period. This is day 5 on the forecast for Monday, and you can see a fairly large, a really large wind field here, well outlined. And remember, even so this may not be as strong beyond, say, 6 or 7 days, keep in mind, too, the wind field here could be expanding due to possible predicted eyewall replacement cycle, or I should say unpredicted ERCs that hurricanes usually have when they get to major intensity. So keep that in mind, too. Looking at the HMON model, Taking this forward out, you can see a hurricane here in 36 hours. We know that for sure. Possibly a major hurricane by Friday. This continues to rapidly intensify all the way out, say, to about 69 hours. This could be a very big system by all means, with winds that are about 140, 150 miles an hour. And then it continues to strengthen a little bit more here, down at 920 millibars by about 4.5 days. By day 5, possibly all the way down to about 919 to 923. That's a very intense output from all the hurricane models of this cycle, including especially the H-Warp, which has been a little conservative, not so conservative this go around. Now, I want to warn you all, what you're about to see is certainly a Cat 5, okay, on the HAFS A and the HAFS B. There is still a little bit of uncertainty in regards to how strong can Lee get within the next 5 or 6 days. The atmosphere certainly supports a Category 5. It's just, will it get to a Cat 5 to take full advantage of the atmosphere? Well, the question here is possibly. There is a non-zero chance, or there is, how should I word this? It's not that it won't happen. There is a good shot at it still occurring, but it's not going to be explicitly shown in my forecast today. All right, I'm still being a little on the low end, but slightly above the NHC's intensity forecast. So when we go out to day 2, we have an inner core structure that forms. This is Friday morning, and then look at this. By Saturday morning, we get to a major hurricane with 128 knot winds, but it gets stronger than that. Take a look at this. This is day 3.5. Day 4, look at this. We have a Category 5 hurricane with pressures that are down to 925 millibars, and it gets even stronger than that. Let's go out to day 5.5, down to 913 millibars with winds at 151 knots, or 152-ish knots. Pressure's down to 911 here, and man, this gets very strong. 909, but that's not even bullish. All right, wait until you see the HAFS B run output. That's even more aggressive. Way, way more aggressive. And I'll tell you what, if this comes true on the HAFS B, we will see a record-breaking hurricane in the Atlantic. Not just from Ian, but since Dorian, perhaps, since 2019. Could even be stronger than that, even. Again, what I said is a little bit of hype, but it is a high ceiling for this system, okay? These are possible outcomes. So 2 days out, 971. 3 days out, 934 millibars. It gets even stronger. Let's go out to 3.5 days, 923. And then look at this. By day 4, 911 millibars with winds near 160 knots at the surface. That is catastrophic if this were ordered to hit land. And then all the way out, look at this, down to 897 millibars with winds that could reach 160 to 165 knots. That is outrageous. That is ridiculously strong, with some low-level winds that could reach 185 knots. That is over 200 miles an hour on Hurricane Lee. So this one really, really, really can make headlines in days to come. Even so it doesn't hit land, this could have a very intense eye wall or eye-like future on it if it does get this strong. But wow, 897 millibars, that's outrageous. That is however ironicable. That's never seen. So looking at the simulated IR satellite imagery, looking at that really quickly, you can see how intense this actually gets. Very, very organized, with a possible eye wall replacement cycle that tries to develop here by the end of the model run. But before that, man, oh man, very symmetrical by all standards. This thing has full advantage over the favorable conditions, and I mean the ceiling on this could be Category 5 hurricane. Looking at this spaghetti plot, there we go. You can see pretty much straightforward away from Puerto Rico, which is good. But again, maybe a grazing impact of tropical storm force winds is not out of the question still yet, since this is going to be getting a little close enough to the islands where there could still be some impacts, such as some rain bands, maybe a water spout or two, but especially the high surf and beach or rip tides and rip currents and stuff. So keep that in mind. But now when we look at the intensity forecast, again, only 2 models right now at the moment. The HMON wants this at a category 4, which is why I explicitly are not calling for that right now at this given time. You can see there the 18Z output. 2 of the halves A and Bs are the only ones that show a category 5. But my intensity forecast is pretty much the same as the NHC, not much different. In fact, it is right on par with the NHC, except it is going to reach still at about 155 miles an hour or so within the next 4 to 5 days. That red line is my forecast, and I'm right there, not far above the NHC, but still below the halves A and B outputs. We're not going to get into the super blend today because we pretty much know the possible outcome scenarios here. I've said it too many times that there's a literal 50-50 shot for the eastern seaboard to get impacted. I know you all are still going to ask me questions. Is this going to hit Florida? Is this going to hit the Carolinas? Is this going to hit Cape Hatteras, New York, Maine, Vermont? Again, my answer in this video will be I don't know yet. So the statistical intensity prediction system calls for very favorable conditions with shear that is generally 5 to 10 knots overall, maybe 15 knots thereafter in the next 2 to 3 days. Won't surprise me if this shear gets a little lower. So we'll have to really watch this intensity and how Lee kind of takes full advantage of these waters. All right, now that we did talk about Lee, again, for the islands, now you know what the impacts could be over the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic, as again, this is now headed pretty much due west-northwest right now at the moment. At times, it wobbles to the northwest, but right now at the moment, there is no impacts, no substantial extreme impacts for the islands. I want to get that correct, but there will still be some minor impacts, such as high surf, coastal flooding, and maybe some gusty winds and some rain bands that could kind of bring some inclement weather to your area. But at least the good news that we have in today's video is this is not going to hit the islands as of right now. But who could get impacted after that? Is it Bermuda? Is it the eastern seaboard? You're going to have to stay tuned on my YouTube channel for the latest information. But you could only do that if you do subscribe and you hit the like button and you share this with your family and friends on social media. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you back here tomorrow.